He drained our joint savings, mocking me for being just a boring housewife. He thought that $92,000 debt was his ticket to freedom with my best friend. He laughed about leaving me with nothing. He just didn't know that when he applied for that $92,000 loan, he was applying directly to me. My name is Clara, and I am 38 years old. To the outside world, to anyone scrolling past my tagged photos, my life was perfect. I lived in one of those sprawling, sterile, clean homes in the wealthy suburbs of Austin, Texas. White marble countertops that were never stained, hardwood floors that never creaked, a swimming pool that reflected the sky like a sheet of flawless blue glass. Every flower in the garden was pruned. Every cushion on the patio furniture was plumped. My life was not just curated, it was manufactured, a seamless Instagram feed brought to life. The architect of this perfect cage was my husband, Leo. At 40, he was devastatingly charismatic, the kind of man who shakes your hand and makes you feel like you are the only person in the room. He was a financial advisor, a title he delivered with an air of complete authority. Leo managed everything: our portfolio, our checking accounts, our retirement funds. It was all under his meticulous control. "You do not need to worry your pretty head about the complex numbers, honey," he would say, tapping the side of my head gently. It was meant to be reassuring, but it always felt like a pat of dismissal. Leo encouraged me to focus on my passions. This translated to chairing the annual hospital auxiliary gala and managing the carpool schedule for our 2 children. He championed my hobbies, which meant he had no problem with me taking a pottery class or a Pilates intensive, as long as it did not interfere with his dinner schedule or his client evenings. Over the years, this gentle steering had slowly, effectively isolated me. I had a master's in art history, a career I had left behind, just for a few years when the kids were born. Now, a decade later, that part of my life felt like it belonged to someone else. I was locked out of my own finances, my own professional world. And then there was my best friend, Sophia. She was a permanent fixture in our home, practically living in our guest suite. She was all sharp angles and bright laughter, a stark contrast to my softer edges. Sophia was always there with a fresh bottle of wine, a sympathetic ear, and endless praise for Leo. "You are just so lucky, Clara," she would sigh, watching Leo mix cocktails by the pool. "He takes care of everything. He is such a wonderful husband, a real provider." She would squeeze my arm, her nails digging in just slightly. "You truly have it all." But I did not feel like I had it all. I felt like a high-end decoration. I was something to be maintained, displayed, and largely ignored. I moved through my perfect house feeling like a ghost, an accessory to the life Leo had built. An uneasy feeling had settled deep in my stomach, a low-level hum of anxiety that I could not trace to a specific source. I had no concrete proof that anything was wrong. I just knew the smile I wore at brunches felt brittle, and the silence in the house after Leo went to his study felt cold and heavy. I was controlled, but so subtly that pointing it out would make me sound paranoid. In those quiet, anxious moments, I would often think of my grandmother, Eleanor. She had passed away 5 years ago. The rest of the family had always called her eccentric. She lived in a small, cluttered bungalow, wore the same 3 cardigans, and saved tin foil. She was intensely private and frugal to a fault. I remembered visiting her as a child, and later as a young woman about to be married. She had looked at Leo, her gaze sharp and assessing in a way no one else dared. Later, she took my hands in her papery dry ones. "Clara," she had warned, her voice low, "do not ever let a man be your only bank. You promise me." I had promised, of course, but at the time, I thought it was just one of Eleanor's strange sayings. That promise echoed in my mind as Leo's behavior grew stranger. He became intensely secretive, his phone now a permanent extension of his hand. It was always screened down on the counter. He would take calls in the garage, pacing back and forth. His late client meetings started piling up, sometimes 3 or 4 nights a week. One evening, I walked into his study without knocking, intending to ask about dinner. He flinched violently, slamming his laptop shut so hard the sound cracked through the quiet house. He snapped at me, asking why I was sneaking around. His eyes were wide with something that looked less like annoyance and more like panic. The tension finally came to a head last Tuesday. He approached me after dinner, all smiles and practiced charm, the loving husband persona fully engaged. He draped an arm over my shoulders and steered me to his desk. "Darling," he started, "I have an incredible opportunity, a sure-thing investment, but we have to move fast." He slid a thick stack of documents in front of me. "I just need you to co-sign on a small business loan. It is just $92,000. My stomach tightened. $92,000 did not sound small. "Leo, I do not understand this. What is it for? Exactly?" He sighed, a dramatic puff of exasperation. "Clara, please. It is just a formality for the underwriters. It is a guaranteed win. Trust me." He tapped the signature line. "I have handled our finances for 15 years. Have I ever steered us wrong?" I looked at his handsome, reassuring face. I saw the man I loved, the father of my children. I pushed down the voice of my grandmother. I felt the familiar shame of my own financial ignorance. I picked up the pen, my hand reluctant, and signed my name. The day my life ended began with a lie about Dallas. It was 3 days after I had signed the loan papers, 3 days during which Leo had been almost giddy with good humor. He kissed me goodbye that morning, his suitcase by the door. "Big meeting in Dallas, honey," he'd said, his smile bright. "This new client is going to set us up for the entire year." He was supposed to be gone for 48 hours. That afternoon, I was sorting through a pointless stack of mail catalogs for furniture I did not need, invitations to luncheons I did not want to attend when my phone vibrated on the marble countertop. It was an email alert from our joint credit card, a payment confirmation, not a charge, but a payment to a hotel, the Hotel Valerian. My blood went cold. The Valerian was not some airport chain in Dallas. It was an exclusive, absurdly expensive boutique hotel right here in Austin, not 15 miles from our house. Why would he be paying a bill there? And why now? The background anxiety I had lived with for years suddenly roared to life, a screaming siren in my head. The perfect silent house felt like a tomb. I did not stop to think. I did not change out of the simple dress I was wearing. I grabbed my keys, my hands shaking so violently I dropped them on the tile floor. The drive downtown was a blur of adrenaline and streetlights, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. I abandoned my car with the valet, walking into the dim, cool lobby that smelled of dark leather and expensive, funereal lilies. My heart was a fist hammering against my ribs. I felt lightheaded, but a terrifying, cold clarity was settling over me. I walked to the front desk, forcing my face into a mask of breathless, conspiratorial joy. "Hi," I gushed, my voice a strained, high-pitched imitation of a happy wife. The receptionist, a young woman with a placid smile, looked up. "I know this is just the craziest request, but I am trying to surprise my husband. It is our anniversary." I gave a little, self-deprecating laugh. "He thinks he is here on a boring business trip, and I just wanted to sneak up. Leo Miller. Can you please tell me what room he is in?" Her smile tightened politely. "Ma'am, I am so sorry, but for guest privacy, I cannot give out a room number." "Oh, God, of course," I said, pressing my hand to my chest as if I were about to faint. "I am so flustered. I am not thinking. Look." I leaned in, dropping my voice to a whisper. "He is expecting a package from me. I was just going to leave it outside his door. I even have my house key. See?" I fumbled in my purse, pulling out the key to my own home and holding it up like a piece of evidence. "He is in 512, I think that is what he texted me." She hesitated, her professional armor cracking slightly at my pathetic performance. "Let me just check that name again," she said, typing. Yes. Mr. Miller in 512. I can escort you up, ma'am, for security. You are an angel, I breathed. The elevator ride was silent. I watched my pale, terrified face in the mirrored walls. She swiped her master key at the door, and the lock clicked open. Here you are. Have a wonderful anniversary. Thank you, I managed to say. I waited for the agonizingly slow ding of the elevator down the hall before I pushed the heavy door open. The room was dark, the blackout curtains drawn against the bright afternoon sun. The air was thick and stale, smelling of champagne and a perfume I knew better than my own. Sophia's. For a moment, I saw only shapes in the gloom. Then my eyes adjusted. They were on the chaise lounge near the window. Leo, in his shirt sleeves, his tie undone. And Sophia, my best friend, wearing a silk robe. My silk robe, the one I had worn just last week. An open bottle of champagne was sweating in an ice bucket on the floor, next to a pile of discarded clothes, his suit jacket, her red dress. I must have made a sound, a tiny, strangled intake of breath, because they both turned. Their reaction was not guilt, it was not shame, it was not even surprise, it was pure, unadulterated annoyance. They looked at me as if I were a hotel maid who had walked in without knocking. Sophia spoke first. She laughed, a short, sharp bark that cut through the silence. She stood, pulling the belt of my robe tighter around her waist. Well, she drawled, you finally figured it out, did not you? Clara. I was wondering how long it would take. She tilted her head, her smile a venomous slash. Did you really think he could stand being married to someone so boring? Forever? The words hit me, but I could not process them. I just stared at Leo. I was waiting for him to deny it, to yell at her, to invent some desperate, insane lie. He did not. He leaned back against the cushions, picked up his champagne flute, and took a long, slow sip. He watched me over the rim, his eyes cold. That $92,000 debt you co-signed for, he said, his voice perfectly calm, as if he were discussing a golf score. That is our startup money. Clara, Sophia and I are starting a new life. We are thinking Belize, somewhere warm. He set the glass down. She is right. It is over. How? How could you? The words were barely air. My children. Our home. 15 years. That, finally, made him move. The casual cruelty vanished, replaced by a sudden, sharp anger. He stood up and stalked toward me, his face a mask of contempt. How I will tell you how. I have been planning this for years. You idiot! He stopped just inches from me, forcing me to look at him. I have already made sure you get nothing in the divorce. Nothing. You think you have access to our money? I have been moving assets for the last 5 years. The accounts are empty. I have controlled every single dollar that has come in or out of that house for a decade. He jabbed a finger toward my face. You were just a signature, Clara, a convenience. You were too damn busy with your little charity boards and your pottery classes to ever ask a single intelligent question. He gestured back toward Sophia, who was watching us with a smug, satisfied smirk. This is my life now. And that $92,000, that was just the exit fee to get rid of you. My legs buckled. I grabbed the door frame to keep from collapsing. The shock was physical, a crushing weight in my chest that stole all the air from my lungs. This was not a desperate, heat-of-the-moment affair. This was not a simple betrayal. This was an execution, a cold, meticulous, financial assassination that had been planned for years, and I had just handed them the gun. I do not remember the drive home from the hotel. It is a complete blank, a stretch of time erased by the sheer, concussive force of the betrayal. I must have driven, because I found myself standing in the center of my perfect, silent kitchen. The keys to my car still clenched so tightly in my hand that the teeth were biting into my palm. The house was cold, every gleaming surface, Every piece of carefully chosen art, every neutral-toned rug seemed to mock me. This was not my home. It was a stage set for a life I was apparently just an understudy in. I sat on a hard designer kitchen stool and waited. I did not cry. I was frozen, hollowed out. Leo did not come home. The sun went down, and the automated landscape lighting clicked on, illuminating the prize-winning hydrangeas. The sun came up. The doorbell rang at precisely 9 o'clock the next morning. It was a process server. He handed me a thick, heavy envelope. "You have been served, ma'am," he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. I sat at the massive kitchen island and opened it. Divorce. In re. The marriage of Miller and Miller. Filed by Marcus Thorne, an attorney whose shark-like smile I had seen on the covers of local business magazines. Attached was another document, an emergency motion to freeze all community assets. My hands, which had been so steady, began to tremble. I grabbed my phone. I tried to log into our main joint savings account, the one I had watched Leo proudly show me as it grew, the one earmarked for the children's college education. Access denied. I tried my personal checking account. Access denied. I called the bank, my voice sounding strange and thin in the empty room. "Yes, Mrs. Miller." A polite, procedural voice on the other end said, "A court order was faxed to us this morning. All assets related to your joint accounts are frozen pending a hearing." "But my personal account," I whispered. "That is not joint." There was a pause, the sound of typing. "I am sorry, ma'am." "That account has a balance of $0.14. It appears a wire transfer was initiated yesterday afternoon for the full balance. Emptying the account? Yesterday afternoon, while I was driving to the Hotel Valerian. He had drained my personal safety net while he was sitting in that room with her. The panic, cold and acidic, finally clawed its way up my throat. I grabbed my purse, my credit cards. I had to buy groceries. I had to put gas in the car. I had to do something normal. I drove to the supermarket, the one where the staff all knew me by name. I filled a cart with milk, bread, fruit, things for the children. I walked to the checkout line. I swiped my American Express. The machine beeped, a sharp, ugly sound. Declined. The cashier, a young woman I recognized, looked embarrassed for me. Try it again. I swiped it again. Declined. I felt the heat rising in my face. I fumbled for my Visa. Declined. The debit card. Card error. See teller. "Ma'am," the cashier said, her voice low, "none of these are working." The man behind me sighed impatiently. I abandoned the full cart and walked out, my entire body burning with a humiliation so profound it felt like a physical illness. I sat in my car and called the credit card company. "Yes, Mrs. Miller," the operator said, his voice crisp. "The primary cardholder, Mr. Leo Miller, reported all cards on this account as stolen this morning. They have been permanently deactivated. We will have to issue you new ones, but we cannot mail them to your current address without his authorization." Stolen. He had reported me as a thief. I was driving, though I did not know where. I found myself pulling into the parking lot of Innovate Solutions Group, the small design firm where I worked part-time. Leo had helped me get the job, a favor from his golf buddy, Mr. Davies. I needed a paycheck. I needed an advance. I needed to prove I was still a person. Mr. Davies saw me through his glass office wall. His friendly, ruddy face tightened. He met me at the door, blocking my entrance. "Clara, I am so glad you came in." "Mr. Davies," I started. "I know this is sudden, but I need to ask about an advance on my salary. I have a family emergency." He winced. He could not look me in the eye. "Clara, that is not going to be possible. Look, why do you not take a seat?" He led me not into his office, but to a hard chair in the lobby. "Clara, Leo stopped by this morning. He was deeply concerned about you." A cold dread settled over me. Concerned. What did he say? He said you are going through some personal issues, that you have been unstable, erratic. He was worried for your well-being, of course, but also about how it might affect your performance here, the reliability our clients expect. What? I am so sorry, Clara, but given the circumstances, we cannot have that kind of instability here. We have to let you go. It is effective immediately. I had been fired, preemptively. He had not just cut off my money, he had cut off my ability to make any. When I got home, there was a certified letter taped to the ornate, custom-built front door. It was not from a divorce lawyer, it was from a local commercial bank I had never heard of. Notice of intent to foreclose. I tore it open, my fingers ripping the paper. It stated that our home was in default, not on our primary mortgage, but on a secondary home equity line of credit, a loan for an amount so staggering I could not even process it at first, a loan that had been taken out 6 months ago, a loan I had no knowledge of, but one that was now, apparently, delinquent. He had mortgaged our home to the hilt, pulling every cent of equity out of it, and then stopped paying. The next 6 days were a blur of systematic destruction. I found a lawyer who would take me on pro bono for the initial hearing, a tired-looking woman from legal aid. We stood in a sterile courtroom. Leo was on the other side, dressed in a somber suit, his face a mask of profound sadness. His lawyer, Thorne, stood and addressed the judge. He painted a picture of a woman coming undone. He presented my firing from Innovate Solutions as proof of my erratic behavior. He presented the declined credit cards as evidence of my financial irresponsibility. He presented my own husband's deeply worried testimony that I was mentally unstable and a danger to myself and my children. When it was my turn, I just stammered. He is lying. He is with my best friend. He drained the accounts. Thorne just shook his head pityingly. Your Honor, as you can see, she is deeply confused. This is precisely the kind of delusion Mr. Miller was worried about. The judge, a man who saw dozens of these cases a day, looked at the evidence. He saw a successful, calm, well-represented financial advisor, and he saw a hysterical, unemployed woman with no money and no lawyer. He granted Leo's motion. I lost everything. I was barred from the house. Leo was granted temporary custody of the children, who were still, mercifully, at summer camp, unaware. In 1 week, 7 days, I went from being Clara Miller, respected wife and mother in Austin, to a homeless, jobless, friendless woman with exactly $37 in cash to my name. There was no one to call. The friends I had shared brunches and carpools with for a decade were Leo's friends, wives of his partners and clients. My calls went to voicemail. My texts went unanswered. I was a pariah, the unstable wife he had so bravely tried to save. With my last $37, I took a cab to the only place that would have me, a place that charged by the week and did not ask for a credit card, the Crestview Motor Inn. It was a long, low building on the side of the highway, painted a faded, sickly yellow. My room, number 114, smelled of industrial bleach, stale cigarette smoke, and a deep, unshakable dampness. The carpet was a tapestry of old, dark stains. The air conditioner rattled like a box of stones. Every time a truck roared past, the single-pane window vibrated in its frame. This was my new home. I, who had lived in a 6,000-square-foot house with a 3-car garage, was now living in a 200-square-foot room with a brown-stained bathtub. I spent the first 2 days in a catatonic daze, the television playing unwatched, its cheerful, idiotic noise a weak shield against the reality of the highway outside. On the 3rd day, the gnawing hunger in my stomach forced me to move. I walked to the convenience store next door and bought a brick of instant ramen and a plastic bottle of water. I had $29 left. I spent my days at the public library, using their computers to apply for jobs. Anything, receptionist, data entry, retail. I had a master's degree, but it was useless. I was a 38-year-old woman who had not held a real job in 15 years. The few interviews I managed to get were humiliating. They would look at my resume, look at my old address, and then look at me with a polite, clinical curiosity. "So, you are leaving the Austin art scene?" one woman at a gallery asked, and then the inevitable. "I see you are not using your husband's connections for a reference." The unstable and erratic narrative Leo had spun was everywhere. I was toxic. After another week, I was down to $4. I sat on the lumpy bed, the thin polyester comforter scratching my skin. The life I had known, the expensive dinners, the charity galas, the sound of my children's laughter in the playroom felt like a movie I had watched about someone else. My whole existence had been a lie, a gilded cage Leo had built around me, and I had been too comfortable, too trusting, too boring to ever notice the door was locked. I had managed to grab one bag from the house before the locks were changed. It contained 2 pairs of jeans, a few t-shirts, my toiletries, and one other item. My grandmother Eleanor's old wooden box. I pulled it onto my lap. It was a simple, dark cherrywood box, about the size of a book. It was not ornate or valuable. I had kept it on my vanity for 5 years, but I had never once opened it. I told myself it was out of respect, but the truth was, I just assumed it was full of old photographs or dried flowers, sentimental things that belonged only to her. I ran my fingers over the smooth wood. I thought of her sharp eyes, her frugal life. "Don't ever let a man be your only bank." The words were a bitter acid in my mouth. I had failed her. I had failed myself. My thumb brushed against the bottom of the box. I felt a ridge. I turned it over. There, held flat by a brittle, yellowed piece of Scotch tape, was a tiny, flat key, the kind you might use for a small diary or a jewelry box. My heart gave a strange, dull thud. I had never seen this key before. I peeled the tape off, my fingernails digging at the old adhesive. I turned the box back over and found the keyhole, almost invisible in the dark wood. I inserted the key. It turned, and with a small, dry click, the box unlatched. I lifted the lid, my breath held. Inside, there was no wad of cash, no glittering jewelry. My first reaction was a wave of crushing disappointment. It was almost empty. All that was there was a bed of faded black velvet, and resting on it were 2 things. One was a key. It was the strangest key I had ever seen. It was heavy, made of solid brass, long and ornate, like something that would open a castle dungeon or a pirate's chest. It was old. The other was a single envelope, thick and made of heavy cream-colored cardstock. My name, Clara, was written on the front in my grandmother's familiar, spidery script. My hands were shaking again, but not from fear. It was something else. I broke the wax seal on the back of the envelope and pulled out the folded letter. The ink was black, the handwriting precise. "My dearest Clara," it began. "If you are reading this, it means you are in trouble, and you have finally opened my box. I am sorry I am not there to help you, but I left you something better than myself. I left you tools. First, I told you to be careful. The man you married, Leo Miller, is a fool, just like his father was. His father was a gambler who charmed everyone and ruined everyone he touched. I saw the same weakness in Leo the first time he shook my hand. But a fool with charm is also dangerous. I knew this day would come. I let you all believe I was an eccentric old woman living on a small pension. It was a useful lie. The truth is, I spent my life building something solid, something quiet, something powerful. In 1958, I founded the Pinecrest Heritage Trust. The family, your mother included, never knew. It is not a bank for ordinary people, Clara. It is a private trust, a fortress for the quiet, old money of this state. We do not advertise. We do not have glass towers. We are ghosts. I was the founder, and I was the sole owner. Upon my death, That ownership, in its entirety, passed into a blind trust in your name. The bank is yours now, my dear. Every brick, every vault, every asset. They have been waiting for your instructions. This handwritten letter is your key. The man you need to speak to is Mr. Sterling. He is the bank's director, and he was my most trusted advisor. He will know what to do. The other key, the heavy brass one, is not for the bank. It is for my personal vault in the bank's cellar. Vault number 1. What is inside is also yours. Do not cry, Clara, and do not be afraid. You are not a fool. You are my granddaughter. Go and claim what is yours. And then, you go and take back what that man stole from you. I read the letter once, then twice, then a third time. The words swam. Pinecrest Heritage Trust. I had never heard of it. Sole owner. I looked around the filthy, smoke-stained motel room. The highway noise was a dull roar. I looked at the heavy brass key in my palm, its metal cold against my skin. It was impossible. It was a joke, a cruel, insane fantasy. But as I sat there, the weight of the key in my hand felt like the only real thing in the world. I spent my last $4, 3 on a bus ticket that took me to the edge of downtown, and 1 on a stale coffee from a gas station. I had not eaten in 24 hours. I was wearing my last clean t-shirt, a pair of worn jeans, and sneakers. My hair was pulled back in a greasy, defeated ponytail. I was invisible. I was a ghost. The address from Eleanor's letter was not a glittering glass skyscraper. It was a 4-story building of dark, imposing granite, wedged between 2 larger, nondescript office towers. It was anonymous, severe, and looked more like a fortress or a private museum than a bank. The only sign was a small, polished brass plaque next to the heavy oak doors, engraved with 3 simple letters, P.H.T. I pulled the door open, the weight of it surprising me. The lobby was silent, cavernous, and empty, save for a single massive desk of dark mahogany. It smelled of old wood, floor wax, and money. A man in a perfectly tailored suit sat behind it, more a security guard than a receptionist. He looked up, and his eyes, cold and assessing, took in my stained jeans and cheap sneakers and dismissed me in a single, practiced glance. "Can I help you?" His voice was polite, but it was the politeness one uses to tell someone they are in the wrong place. My own voice was a dry rasp. "I am here to see a Mr. Alistair Sterling." "Mr. Sterling does not take walk-in appointments," he said, his gaze already returning to his computer monitor. "Please," I said, my voice cracking with a desperation that shamed me. "It is about Eleanor Reed." That name made him pause. He looked back at me, his eyes narrowing. "Mrs. Reed passed away over 5 years ago." "I know. She left this for me." My hand was shaking so badly I could barely open my bag. I pulled out the thick, cream-colored envelope. I did not pull out the key. Just the letter. I slid it across the acres of polished wood. He picked it up, his expression one of faint annoyance. He looked at the unbroken wax seal on the back. He looked at the spidery script on the front. His entire body went rigid. The professional disdain vanished, replaced by a sudden, sharp shock, almost like fear. He shot to his feet, knocking his chair back. "One moment, please. Do not move." He did not walk. He all but ran to a set of tall, paneled doors, disappearing through them. I was left standing in the vast, silent room, my heart hammering against my ribs. I felt small and filthy. I was trespassing. This was all a mistake, a cruel, dying joke from an old woman. The doors opened again. The manager emerged, his face pale, holding the door open. Following him was an older gentleman, tall and impossibly elegant, with a full head of silver hair and a suit that probably cost more than my car. He moved with a quiet, lethal authority. He was not looking at the manager. His sharp, intelligent eyes were fixed directly on me. He held my grandmother's letter in his hand. He walked straight toward me, his gaze sweeping over me once, from my unwashed hair to my worn-out shoes. He was not assessing my poverty. He was assessing my features. He was looking for her. He stopped 2 feet in front of me, and then he inclined his head in a deep, formal bow. It was not a gesture for a lost woman in a bank lobby. It was a gesture for royalty. "Mrs. Miller," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "I am Alistair Sterling. We have been waiting for you." He turned to the manager, who was frozen in place. "Richard, that will be all." He gestured for me to precede him through the paneled doors. "Please, Madam Chairman, come this way." "Madam Chairman." The words echoed in the silent hallway. I felt lightheaded. I followed him through a series of hushed, carpeted corridors into a large, wood-paneled office that looked more like a university library than a banker's room. "Please," he said, gesturing to a large leather chair. He sat opposite me, placing my grandmother's letter on the desk between us. "Mr. Sterling," I whispered. "I do not understand. My grandmother. She lived in a bungalow. She saved aluminum foil." A faint, sad smile touched his lips. "She was, without question, the most brilliant woman I have ever known. And the most private. That bungalow, that image. It was a shield. It allowed her the anonymity to build and manage this." He explained. "Pinecrest Heritage Trust. It was not a bank, not in the way I understood it. It was a private, chartered fortress. It managed the fortunes of families so wealthy they valued one thing above all absolute: total privacy. Your grandmother founded this institution in 1958. She was its sole architect, its sole proprietor. Upon her death, her entire estate, which is this institution, was placed in a dormant trust, a trust that, by her explicit, legally unassailable directive, could only be activated by you, in person, presenting this letter." He slid a heavy leather-bound portfolio across the desk. "She left you everything, Mrs. Miller. The bank, the assets, the holding companies, the real estate portfolio. It is all yours." I opened it. The numbers were incomprehensible, a long string of zeros that my brain simply could not process. This was not rich. This was not wealthy. This was a level of financial power I had never known existed. I, who had $4, was one of the single most powerful financial figures in the state. The whiplash of it, the sheer, crushing absurdity, made me gasp for air. I looked up at him, helpless. "Your grandmother was a pragmatist," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "She knew you would not open that box unless your life was in ruins. She knew Leo Miller's character. She saw this coming, which is why she left us instructions." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a second, much thinner file. My name was not on it. Leo's was. "Mrs. Reed had us, informally, monitoring your husband's financial activities for the past 7 years. She was deeply unimpressed. She recognized the gambling, the high-risk behavior of his father." My stomach turned to ice. "Leo Miller has been making increasingly desperate and foolish investments for 18 months, Sterling continued, his voice hardening, losing its warmth and becoming purely procedural. "He was deeply in debt, leveraging your home without your knowledge, trying to cover his catastrophic losses. He was insolvent. The $92,000, I breathed. "The loan." "Correct." Mr. Sterling opened the file. He was rejected by every reputable lender in the city. He finally applied for a high-risk, last-resort loan from a firm called Apex Capital Ventures. He was so frantic for the cash. He signed everything without reading the fine print. He never bothered to investigate who, exactly, owned Apex Capital. He paused, his cold, gray eyes meeting mine. Apex Capital Ventures is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Pinecrest Heritage Trust. It exists for the sole purpose of acquiring the assets of high-risk debtors. I stared at him, the world tilting. Mrs. Miller, he clarified, his voice sharp as a scalpel. Your husband did not borrow that money from a stranger. He borrowed it from you. And as the new chairman of this board, you are now, personally, his creditor. That $92,000 loan and every other delinquent debt he has is now owed directly to you. I did not leave Mr. Sterling's office for 3 days. The person who had walked into that granite fortress, the hollowed-out invisible woman with $4 and dirty jeans, she evaporated the moment I saw Leo's file. The woman who sat in that oversized leather chair, who was given a new suit, hot food, and black coffee, was someone else. She was quiet, she was cold, and she was, for the first time in her life, incandescently furious. The boring housewife was dead, and the chairman of the board had just taken her seat. Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice no longer a whisper. It was low and steady. I do not want a divorce lawyer. He raised a single silver eyebrow. No, Madam Chairman. No. Lawyers argue. They posture. I do not want to argue. I looked at the file with Leo's name on it. I want a weapon. I want a team. The absolute best forensic accountants you know, the most discreet, relentless private investigators in this state. I want to know where every single cent he has ever touched has gone. I want to know every password, every login, every secret account, every lie. A slow, satisfied smile spread across Sterling's face. Your grandmother once attended a Christmas party at your home. She overheard Mr. Miller refer to her as a frugal old bat. She never forgot it. The team you require is, in fact, already on retainer with this bank. We call them the auditors. He made 2 phone calls. Within an hour, they were in the room, a man and a woman, neither of whom looked like accountants. They looked like intelligence operatives, all sharp eyes and quiet efficiency. We did not meet in Sterling's office. We relocated to a secure conference room in the sub-basement, a war room with no windows, reinforced steel walls, and its own secure network. My instructions were simple. I am the owner of this bank. My husband, Leo Miller, and his associate, Sophia Ramirez, are financial liabilities. I have concrete reason to believe he has defrauded my institution via the Apex Capital loan. I am authorizing a full, deep-dive audit of all their known and suspected assets. You have unlimited resources. You have my full authority. I want it done in absolute secrecy. I want a complete map of his financial life. I want to know what he ate for breakfast. For the first time in 15 years, I was the bank, and the bank had access to everything. We were not hacking. We were not breaking the law. We were a creditor exercising our contractual rights. We started by following the $92,000 loan. It took them less than 12 hours to find the first crack. The $92,000 from Apex Capital, my company had been wired not into a new startup account for Belize, but into an over-leveraged, high-risk trading account at a mainstream brokerage. It had been deposited at 3:04 in the afternoon on the day he took the money. He was plugging a hole. Madam Chairman, the lead accountant, a quiet man named Harris, told me, his eyes never leaving his screen. A massive margin call. He was hours away from being exposed. This $92,000 was a desperate, panicked move to stop the bleeding. A hole from what I asked, my blood turning to ice. That, Harris said, is the real question. They dove deeper. The brokerage account was not just his. It was a complex omnibus account, a pool, and the money in that pool. The money he had been gambling with and lost. It was not his. The $92,000 loan was not the tip of the iceberg. It was a single snowflake on top of a glacier. The first major twist landed on the second day. Leo, in his capacity as a trusted financial advisor, had been systematically and ruthlessly embezzling from his clients for years. It was a sickeningly simple, cruel scheme. His clients were, almost exclusively, elderly, retired, people who, like me, trusted him completely. People who believed him when he said, "Just sign here. Mary, I will handle the complex numbers for you." He would have them sign a stack of routine transfer papers, and buried in that stack would be one that moved $10,000 or $20,000 or $50,000 into an account he controlled. He preyed on the vulnerable. He preyed on the trusting. He had drained the retirement funds of dozens of people who treated him like a son. I felt a new kind of sickness, a rage so cold and pure it burned. This was not just about me anymore. "Where did he put the money?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Harris brought up a new screen. This is the clever part, or so he thought. He showed me a series of domestic corporations, shell companies, all registered in Delaware, all seemingly anonymous. But as their creditor, my bank had the right to subpoena their accounts. The primary account, the one that received all the stolen funds, was named Clara's Way, LLC. I could not breathe. "What did you say?" "He registered it 5 years ago. He used your identity." "Madam Chairman." He showed me the documents. The signature on the Articles of Incorporation was a perfect, practiced forgery of my own. My Social Security number, my date of birth, all the documents he had access to in our home study, the insurance papers, the tax returns, my passport. He had stolen my signature, my name, and had made me the face of his criminal enterprise, the unstable and financially irresponsible wife. He was not just creating a narrative for the divorce, he was creating a fall guy for his crimes. And then, Harris continued, his voice flat, he washed it. He showed me the final chain. The money flowed from Clara's Way LLC in monthly consulting fees to another small company, a business registered right here in Austin, Sophia Designs LLC. Sophia, my best friend, who lived in my house, who drank my wine, who told me I was lucky. Her interior design business was a joke. It had no clients. It had one. Leo. She was not just his lover. She was his money launderer. The whole hideous picture snapped into focus. They had been partners for years. The late nights, the constant praise, the way she encouraged me to take a break and let Leo handle it. It was all part of the con. And the $92,000 loan. It was not startup money for Belize. It was an oh God payment. He had been caught in a catastrophic investment using his client's stolen money. He had lost their life savings, and he needed to replace it now, immediately, before the quarterly reports went out and the clients noticed their accounts were empty. He had not just been cheating on me. He had been building a criminal empire, and he had framed me to take the fall. He had not just ruined my life. He had destroyed the lives of dozens of elderly people who had trusted him with their last dollar. He had not just made a mistake. He had made a choice, and so would I. I did not leave the Granite Fortress. I slept on a cot in a secure records room, showered in the executive gym, and lived on black coffee and catered sandwiches delivered by Mr. Sterling's silent staff. The woman from the Crestview Motor Inn was gone. The only part of her that remained was her mission. I had been a boring housewife. Now, I was a predator, and I was learning to hunt. I did not want a confrontation. I did not want to see Leo's face or hear his lies. That was the old Clara's game, a game of emotion I was guaranteed to lose. The new Clara, the chairman of Pinecrest, understood what her grandmother meant. Revenge should be precise. It should be anonymous. It should be executed with the cold, impersonal finality of a balance sheet. "I do not want to sue him, Mr. Sterling," I said. On the third day, we were in the sub-basement war room. The walls were covered in flowcharts. "Madam Chairman, a lawsuit is a debate. I am not interested in a debate. I am interested in an annihilation. He built his life on his reputation, his charm, and his connections. I am going to take all of it away, and I am going to do it without him ever seeing my face." My method would be Eleanor's. I would deliver the arrows from the shadows, and by the time he realized he was under attack, he would already be bleeding out. For the next 2 weeks, my team worked with a terrifying, beautiful efficiency. They were the auditors Mr. Sterling had promised, a team of forensic accountants, digital investigators, and private detectives who were more like spies than bankers, with the full, unlimited, and legally untouchable power of Pinecrest Heritage Trust behind them. They moved like ghosts through Leo's entire financial life. We compiled what we came to call the dossier. It was not a legal complaint. It was an execution order. It was a perfect, pristine, irrefutable narrative of his crimes, bound in a simple black binder. Inside, it contained every single wire transfer with dates, times, and account numbers, showing the pipeline of stolen money from his elderly clients into the fraudulent Clara's Way LLC, the forged incorporation documents for that company, with the perfect forgery of my signature. A separate, stunning piece of evidence, a notarized affidavit from Leo's former executive assistant. Our investigators had located her in another state. She had quit, she said, because she feared for her own liability. We offered her 5 years' salary in a secure trust in exchange for her sworn testimony. She provided it. She swore, under oath, that she had witnessed Leo and Sophia joking about how easy it was to move the old folks' money, and that she had seen Sophia herself practicing my signature on a legal pad. The complete bank statements from Sophia Designs LLC, showing the laundered money being spent on $5,000 handbags, lease payments for her Porsche, and first-class airfare. Finally, a complete list of the victims, not just their names, but their ages, their original net worth, and what Leo had left them with. It was a list of devastation. It was perfect. It was undeniable. And it was time. I had 3 identical copies made, 3 arrows. I did not mail them from Austin. Mr. Sterling had them flown to a contact in Zurich, who then couriered them to their final destinations. They would arrive on the same day, from an untraceable international source. The first arrow was aimed at his entire career. A complete dossier was delivered to the highest-ranking enforcement official at the regional office of the Securities and Exchange Commission. It was not a tip. It was a fully formed federal case, complete with witness testimony, handed to them on a silver platter. The second arrow was for his freedom. This one was delivered to Alana Royce, the most feared investigative reporter in Texas. She was a Pulitzer finalist known for taking down corrupt politicians and corporate raiders. She was famously immune to charm, and she despised men like Leo. Her copy included a personal, anonymous note. If you want the biggest financial crime story of the year, it is all here. The victims are real. The evidence is yours. The third arrow was the most personal. It was not for Leo. It was for his victims. My team compiled a separate, simplified package for every single person on that list. Each package contained only the proof of their stolen funds, the wire transfers with their names on them, and on the front page, a single typed letter. It explained, in simple terms, that they had been systematically defrauded by Leo Miller. It gave them the direct, private cell phone number of the top financial crimes prosecutor in the Texas Attorney General's office, a man Mr. Sterling knew personally and had already briefed on the impending anonymous tip. We were not just telling them they were victims. We were giving them a loaded gun and pointing them at the target. With the arrows in flight, my work at the bank was done. Mr. Sterling arranged for a car to take me back. I was dressed again in the same worn jeans and t-shirt I had arrived in. He handed me a simple prepaid debit card. "This has $10,000 on it," he said. "Sufficient for your current needs. I believe your full assets are, of course, secure." I was driven, not to the Crestview Motor Inn, but 2 blocks away from it. I got out and walked. I re-entered the small, foul-smelling room, number 114, the stained carpet, the rattling air conditioner. I was, once again, the broke, desperate, unstable wife. I sat on the lumpy bed, turned on the grainy television, and opened a cup of instant noodles. I was playing the part perfectly, and I waited for the world to catch fire. It did not take 48 hours. It took 36. I sat on the lumpy bed in room 114, nursing a lukewarm cup of instant coffee. The sun was just beginning to cast a weak, gray light. My phone, connected to the motel's unsecured, agonizingly slow Wi-Fi, buzzed on the nightstand. It was a news alert from the Austin Chronicle. The headline was a sledgehammer. Austin's trusted advisor, Leo Miller, accused of vast multi-million-dollar fraud. Elderly clients left destitute. My breath caught. It was Alana Royce's byline. She had not just published the story, she had detonated it. I clicked the link, my screen filled with her sharp, surgical prose. It was all there. Every detail from my team's dossier, laid bare for the world. She named the victims. She named Clara's Way LLC, explaining in detail how he had forged my signature and stolen my identity to make me the criminal face of his operation. She named Sophia Designs LLC as the laughably transparent money laundering front. She quoted passages from the former assistant's notarized affidavit. It was not an accusation, it was a conviction, printed on the front page. I turned on the small, buzzing television. It was already the lead story on every local channel. And that is when the second wave hit. "We are live in downtown Austin," a reporter said, standing in front of Leo's sleek glass and steel office building. Behind her, a line of men and women in dark blue windbreakers marked SEC and FBI were carrying identical cardboard boxes out of the front door. Federal agents executed a coordinated no-knock raid on the offices of Miller Financial just before 9 a.m. this morning, acting on what sources call an unprecedented and detailed whistleblower tip. Agents have also been spotted at the home of Mr. Miller and a separate residence belonging to his associate, Ms. Sophia Ramirez. The anchor's voice cut in, sharp with excitement. "We are also learning that a court has issued an emergency order, freezing all known assets belonging to Mr. Miller and Ms. Ramirez, pending a federal investigation. A hotline has been set up for other potential victims." Victims. My third arrow had landed. The news broadcast cut to an interview with a weeping woman in her 70s. "I received a package this morning," she cried, clutching a piece of paper, one of the bank statements my team had sent. Leo. He was like a son to us. He took everything. He took our whole life." Suddenly, the screen filled with faces. The reporter was saying that a class action lawsuit, representing an initial group of 28 victims, had just been filed against both Leo Miller and Sophia Ramirez. The avalanche was rolling, but the most beautiful, most devastating part was yet to come. Leo and Sophia had, apparently, not seen the news. They were insulated in their bubble of arrogance and victory. They were, I assume, too busy packing for Belize, or perhaps just too self-absorbed to notice the world was on fire. I knew, from a small note in my team's file, that they had a reservation that night, a long-standing celebration, booked weeks in advance at Etoile, the most obnoxiously expensive restaurant in the city. I wondered if they would cancel. They did not. I saw it happen on the 10 o'clock news. Alana Royce, in her genius, had given the networks an advance tip on where the couple would be. The news crews were waiting. The broadcast started with helicopter footage, a high-angle shot of the restaurant's glittering patio. "We are live above Etoile," the anchor's voiceover said, where, in a stunning display of either arrogance or ignorance, "Leo Miller and Sophia Ramirez are currently dining." The camera zoomed. There they were, seated at the best table. I could see the dark red of Sophia's dress. I could see the silvery glint of a champagne bucket. "They are, we are told, celebrating," the anchor said, his voice dripping with acid. "Celebrating their new future, funded by the $92,000 loan Mr. Miller took out just days before his assets were frozen." Then, the camera switched to a ground crew, hiding across the street. We watched, in grainy night vision, as two dark sedans pulled up. No lights, no sirens. 4 men in dark suits got out and walked calmly through the restaurant's front door. The camera inside the restaurant, probably from a diner's cell phone, was shaky. It showed the agents approaching the table. Leo looked up, his face a mask of annoyance at being interrupted. He still had his charming, easy smile on. I watched him see the badges. The smile did not fade. It broke. It shattered. The charisma, the confidence, the sheer, smug power that had defined him, it all evaporated in 1 second. His face, which had been ruddy with wine and success, turned a pale, sickly, ashen gray. Sophia, confused, looked at him. She saw his expression and her own face crumpled. "Leo," she said, her voice audible on the footage. "What is this?" One of the agents spoke, his voice low but clear. "Mr. Miller, Ms. Ramirez, you are under arrest." "On what grounds?" Leo managed, his voice a hoarse croak. The agent did not blink. "Conspiracy to commit wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, aggravated identity theft." As they were told to stand, the entire hushed restaurant watching. The first click of the handcuffs echoed in the audio. That is when Sophia lost it. She began to sob, a loud, ugly, wailing sound. "No, Leo, do something. This is a mistake. Tell them." They were walked out the front door. The moment they hit the sidewalk, the night exploded in light. The news cameras, tipped off by Royce, were waiting. Flashbulbs popped, blinding them. "Mr. Miller, did you steal from your clients?" "Sophia, how long have you been laundering his money?" Sophia was hysterical, her makeup running in black streams, a stark contrast to the beautiful, smug woman in the hotel room. She was just a terrified, cuffed criminal. But my eyes were on Leo. He was not the charmer. He was not the predator. He was trapped. His head was down, but the camera caught his face. He was not angry. He was not defiant. He was utterly, primordially terrified. They were pushed, separately, into the backs of the waiting cars. The doors slammed. In my motel room, the anchor was listing the charges again. I watched the replay of Leo's face, that perfect moment of disintegration, as his world ended. The instant noodles on my nightstand were cold. I picked up the flimsy cup, walked to the bathroom, and dumped them in the toilet. I was not hungry. I was satisfied. The federal charges were the public spectacle, the flashing lights, the perp walk, the shame in front of the city's elite that was for the world. My revenge, however, was the quiet, precise, and procedural dissection that happened in the silence afterward. The federal government was a blunt instrument. I was a scalpel. This was the part the SEC knew nothing about. This was the part that was purely, beautifully mine. Leo was in a federal holding cell. The charm, I was told, had curdled into a bitter, panicked rage. He was not a man used to being powerless. He was used to buying, charming, or bullying his way out of any problem. He was now in a concrete room, wearing a paper jumpsuit, and he had only one goal bail. His bail hearing was a disaster for him. The prosecutor, armed with the dossier Alana Royce had also received, painted him as an extreme flight risk, a man with access to millions in stolen funds and a proven willingness to use fraudulent identities. The judge agreed. Bail was set at an astronomical $2 million. This, Leo believed, was just a high price, not an impossible one. He got on the phone with his new criminal defense attorney, a high-powered shark who replaced the civil law bulldog, Thorne. "I do not care what it costs." I can hear him snarling. "Use the accounts. Call my contacts. I want out." His lawyer, a man who charged, I am sure, $1,000 an hour, had to deliver the first piece of bad news. "Leo, there is nothing to use. The SEC freeze is absolute. It is not just the known accounts. It is everything. Every asset, every brokerage account, every piece of property tied to your name, your social security number, and every LLC we have found. We cannot access a dime. You are toxic. But that was just the government's move. Mine was next. While Leo was screaming at his lawyer about the asset freeze, that same lawyer's paralegal was accepting a delivery from a courier. It was a thick, heavy envelope from the Pinecrest Heritage Trust. My name was not on it. It was signed by Alistair Sterling, director. His lawyer read it. And the blood, I am told, drained from his face. He had to go back to the holding cell's phone. "Leo," he said, his voice flat. "We have a new problem. A much bigger one." "What new problem?" "You have a $92,000 loan from a firm called Apex Capital Ventures. They are calling it. The full balance is due, effective immediately." Leo would have laughed, a hollow, barking sound. "So what? Get in line. It is all frozen. They cannot get anything." "You do not understand, Leo," the lawyer said. "They are not getting in line. They are claiming a material breach of contract, your arrest, the fraud charges. It triggered a default clause. They are not waiting for the government. They are a secured creditor. They are seizing the collateral." This, I knew, would be the moment of confusion. "What collateral?" "My desk. The office computers. It is all frozen." And the lawyer would have had to explain. "No, Leo, not that. The asset you pledged to secure that specific loan. The asset that, for some reason, was not on the financial disclosures you gave to me. Or to the SEC. Or, apparently, to anyone." Leo was silent. "A private art collection." The lawyer read from my bank's letter. "Held at a climate-controlled storage facility. They are claiming it. And they are claiming several other outstanding loans you defaulted on that. It seems they also own. They are taking everything." This was the asset Leo had hidden from everyone. It was his emergency parachute, the one he was hiding from me, and, most importantly, the one he was hiding from Sophia. It was a collection of rare modern art bought with the first wave of stolen client money years ago. It was his real retirement, his run for the Hills Fund, and in his desperation to get that last $92,000, he had been arrogant enough to pledge it, believing no one would ever connect the dots or that he could pay it back before anyone noticed. He had used his secret to secure a loan from my bank. While Leo was processing this in his cell, a team from Pinecrest, not in bankers' suits, but in the crisp uniforms of a bonded repossession and logistics company, was at that storage facility. They presented the legally unassailable paperwork. They cut the high-security lock. They inventoried every painting, every sculpture. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, Leo's entire secret net worth was sitting in a subterranean vault beneath my feet in the Pinecrest building. The federal government had frozen his visible assets. I had just vaporized his invisible ones. He was no longer just a man in jail. He was a poor man in jail. And this move had an echo. In another part of the jail, Sophia was in her own cell, talking to her own court-appointed lawyer. Her plan was simple play, the victim, the charmed, manipulated woman who was in love with a monster. She was terrified, but she held one trump card she believed Leo had millions hidden away. She assumed he would post her bail, hire her a dream team of lawyers. She just had to wait. Her lawyer, doing his due diligence, called Leo's lawyer. "My client is, of course, denying all involvement, but we are interested in Mr. Miller's plans for a joint defense. What is his position on bail for Ms. Ramirez?" Leo's lawyer, who was now representing a client with $0, was blunt. "Mr. Miller is not in a position to post his own bail, let alone anyone else's. His known assets are frozen, and his hidden assets were just seized by a private creditor. As far as I am concerned, my client is insolvent. Your client is on her own." When Sophia's lawyer delivered that message, she did not just get scared. She did not just get angry. She became reptilian. The money was gone. Not just the stolen funds the SEC had frozen, but the real money. The secret art collection Leo had always promised her was their future, their escape. She realized, in that instant, that he had not just been lying to me, He had been lying to her, too. He had a parachute just for himself. And now, it was gone. Her loyalty, which was only ever a transaction, evaporated. At 4:15 that afternoon, Sofia Ramirez requested a meeting with the U.S. attorney. She did not just offer a plea deal. She offered a full confession, a complete, detailed roadmap of their entire operation. She would give them every date, every account number, every password. She would wear a wire. She would hand them Leo's head on a platter. All she wanted, in exchange, was a lighter sentence. Leo had lost his money. He had lost his freedom. And now, thanks to my quiet, procedural move, he had just lost his only ally. The federal trial was 6 months away, but it was a formality. Sofia, in a desperate, last-minute bid for self-preservation, had testified against Leo in excruciating detail. She gave the prosecutors everything, painting herself as a love-struck, manipulated fool, and Leo as a sociopathic mastermind. Combined with the irrefutable evidence from my dossier and the tearful testimony of 24 elderly victims, Leo's conviction was a foregone conclusion. He was looking at a minimum of 20 years in federal prison. He was, for the moment, out. His elderly parents, horrified and humiliated, had liquidated their own retirement fund to post his $2 million bond. He was 40 years old, the toast of Austin, and was now living in the guest room of his parents' modest suburban house, wearing an ankle monitor. He was completely, utterly, and publicly broke. The SEC had everything, or so he thought. He was waiting for the end. But I had one last, personal piece of business. A letter arrived at his parents' address. It was not from the U.S. attorney. It was on thick, cream-colored cardstock, bearing the embossed, anonymous logo of the Pinecrest Heritage Trust. It was not a request. It was a summons. He was legally compelled to attend a mandatory debt mediation regarding the default on loans held by Apex Capital Ventures. He must have scoffed at it. A minor irritation, a small claims creditor trying to get blood from a stone while he was facing the end of his life. Still, it was mandatory. His new public defender, a harried, overworked man named Calloway, advised him he had to go. On a Tuesday morning, Leo Miller walked into the granite fortress of my bank. He looked terrible. The confident, charismatic man was gone, replaced by a gray, haggard shell. His expensive suit hung loosely on him, frayed slightly at the cuffs. He looked annoyed, defeated, and impatient. He was met in the lobby by his public defender, who was already sweating, clearly intimidated by the sheer, silent wealth of the building. "This way, Mr. Miller," a silent bank employee in a severe suit said. They were not led to a small office. They were led to the main, third-floor boardroom. The door opened, revealing a room 100 feet long, dominated by a single, colossal table of polished black mahogany that reflected the gray city sky like a dark mirror. The air was cold, silent, and smelled of old leather and power. At the far end of the table, 2 people were already seated. One was Alistair Sterling, who looked at Leo with the impassive, cold expression of a mortician. The other was me. Leo stopped. He physically recoiled, as if he had walked into a wall. He stared. I was not the woman in the dirty jeans from the motel. I was not the crying, hysterical wife he had destroyed in court. I was seated at the head of the table, in the chairman's seat. I was wearing a custom-tailored Tom Ford suit in the darkest shade of blue. My hair was pulled back. My eyes were level. I did not smile. I simply watched him. He looked at me. He looked at Sterling. He looked at his bewildered public defender. His brain, arrogant and self-obsessed to the last, could not process the information. It tried to find a box to put me in, the only box he had ever had for me. He gave a short, incredulous, desperate laugh. "Clara," he said, his voice a hoarse croak. He gestured, confused. "What? What are you doing here? Did you get a job? Are you the secretary?" Are you here to take the minutes?" His public defender winced, sensing his client had just made a profound error. Mr. Sterling did not move, but his voice cut through the silence, cold and sharp. "Mr. Miller," he said. Leo turned. Sterling rose slowly from his chair, a towering, silver-haired figure of judgment. "Sir, you are not addressing the secretary. You are addressing Madam Clara Miller, the chairwoman of the board and the sole owner of the Pinecrest Heritage Trust and all its subsidiaries, including Apex Capital Ventures." The color drained from Leo's face. It was not a gradual thing. It was instant, as if a plug had been pulled. The blood, the life, the arrogance, all of it vanished. He put a hand on the back of a chair to steady himself. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He understood. In one horrific, soul-shattering second, he understood everything. My grandmother, the eccentric old woman, the stupid loan, the bank, my disappearance. He understood that he had not been hunted by the government. He had been executed by his wife. I said nothing. I let the silence stretch, letting him drown in it. I let him feel the walls of the trap he had built for himself finally snap shut. When I was sure he could feel the cold on his skin, I picked up a single sheet of paper. I slid it down the long, polished mahogany table. The sound of its whispery slide was the only sound in the room. It stopped perfectly, right in front of him. He looked down. It was the original $92,000 loan application. His signature was on the bottom line. I finally spoke. My voice was calm, clear, and had no emotion in it at all. It was the voice of a creditor. "You lied about the $92,000 debt," I said. "But that was your smallest lie, your biggest mistake, Leo, was not knowing who you were borrowing from." He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a terror that was deeper than prison. It was the terror of a man who realized he had been a fool, a puppet, his entire life. "The federal government," I continued, standing up, "will take your freedom. My bank, however, has already taken everything else. This mediation is over." I turned, my footsteps silent on the thick carpet, and walked out of the boardroom. I did not look back. I left him there, paralyzed, a ghost in a borrowed suit, left to be disposed of in the hollow, echoing ruins of his own making. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I would love to connect and share our thoughts. Remember to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so more people can hear this story.